All right. So, just like many things. So if you're just joining us, this is the Financial 15. This is the last 15 minutes or so of the Tuesday weekly webinar, which is about a 45-minute or so broadcast where we talk about some IRA distribution updates thrown in the Ed Slack group, and we talk about some market updates and some analyst reports, and then we move on to the Financial 15 here. So if you're just watching this portion or just joining us now, be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and notification button so that you are always up to date on what's on the videos that we're putting out. So this topic is your IRA protected from creditors? And as I was saying, this came about from a conversation I had with somebody, and they said, well, nobody can touch my IRA, right? Well, the question is maybe, and it depends on where the funds came from, and it depends on where you live. So let me just clarify a couple things. I'm going to read this. My goal is not to give you, my goal is to give you a general idea about creditor protection. This is not a definitive guide. You should certainly speak to a qualified attorney if you have specific questions. And we're going to talk a bit about the difference between bankruptcy and creditor protection, because that's a common misunderstanding that I hear from people. If you roll, and let me just talk about this. If you roll, a 401k, a company plan, a retirement plan into an IRA, because it's a 401k, it has 100% federal bankruptcy protection, but it doesn't mean it has 100% creditor protection. And that's different, of course. If you're seeking bankruptcy protection, that's one thing, but it doesn't mean other people, if you don't go down the route of bankruptcy, it doesn't mean that your funds can't be accessed. So I'm going to give credit where credit is due, as I always do. I'm moving my tablet right now down. I hope it doesn't disconnect. I'm always a little concerned about that, but I'm moving it down so I can draw on this. But all this information comes from our manual. So it's been a few weeks now, but last month I attended a 3-day event down in National Harbor with the Ed Slack group. So Ed and his team put on a day and a half or so. I was down there a day earlier because I'm on, as I mentioned, Ed's board this year. And we had a meeting the day before, but it's about a day and a half or 2 days of tax law updates, case law updates, IRA distribution updates. That is a requirement to be involved in be part of Ed's master lead advisor group, or his lead advisor group generally. But there's a I swear I'm going to bring it in one day. It's sitting on my conference table, not 2 rooms away here, but it's a book about this thick, and you'll see all my different tags on there. But this material comes right from that training manual, and it's provided by Shannon Evans. Shannon is, I always say I meet some of the smartest people in the world there. Shannon's one of them. She is a very, very intelligent individual. So these are Shannon's notes I'm going to share with you. So hopefully you can see them okay. Let me make sure I'm not cutting anything off. We're going to talk about federal protection, bankruptcy, and non-bankruptcy for ERISA plans, qualified plans. That's for ERISA plans. That's qualified plans with at least one employee, other than business owner or spouse who are plan participants. So just if you have a solo 401k, that may not apply to you. SEP, how about SEP and simple IRAs and IRAs? SEP and simple IRAs, not ERISA. They don't fall under ERISA, but complete bankruptcy protection under Bankruptcy Code. Non-bankruptcy protection based on state law. And we're going to go through this because you should know what the law is in your state. Remember, this isn't just about bankruptcy. You want to protect, when you're doing any kind of planning like this, it's a little tongue in cheek, but you want to protect yourself from creditors, predators, predators, right? In-laws and outlaws. All right, that's the idea. And you want to make sure that you at least have an understanding of what's at risk. And if you're leaving money to your children and it's going to be IRA money, you got to also, if it makes sense, help protect them as well. But again, be aware of this. Be aware of these things. I don't want anybody to think that, hey, just because it's an IRA, and I hear this in class, and I heard it a week ago, well, my IRA is protected, right? Nobody can get that. And I think that was the comment. So let's talk about it. So IRAs have a limit. The bankruptcy protection, $1,512,350 per IRA owner, not per IRA account. If the owner has multiple investment accounts, it's indexed for inflation, so it goes up every year. Non-bankruptcy protection, again, is based on state law. So bankruptcy protection for an IRA, if it doesn't come from a 401k or another retirement plan, company retirement plan, it's limited to $1,512,350. However, that is just bankruptcy protection, not creditor protection. That's driven by state law. And believe it or not, we're going to go through the states. Where did that come about? That came about from a court decision. A judge said some time ago that it was closer to $1 million, that he didn't figure that anybody could amass more than, I think it was about $1,200,000, given a reasonable growth and contributions of their working lifetime. So that's where it started, and it does index for inflation every year. So that's the limit on federal bankruptcy protection. It doesn't for IRAs that don't come from retirement plans. IRA owners, potential creditors, bankruptcy, federal and state, civil creators, judgments and charging orders, state statutes, case law control, child support and alimony, state laws control that. That's very important too. Qualifying for Medicaid and SSI must spend down the IRA also. IRA beneficiaries, no federal protection. State statutes control that. So think about inherited IRAs, IRA money you're going to leave to your children. This is why it's such an important planning topic. Many people think, okay, I'm going to leave my kids my Roth IRA. It's tax-free. That's good. But think about if you're, remember, in-laws and outlaws, right? It's not just creditors and predators, but also in-laws and outlaws. Think about that. Future son-in-law, daughter-in-law, somebody who might have access to those funds. State protection depends on state where beneficiary resides. This is important. State protection depends on state where beneficiary resides, not the deceased owner's state of residence. So you might live in Florida where you have a 100% creditor protection you're going to see for all of your IRA accounts, but your children live in Pennsylvania where there's some stipulations there, or may live in another state where there is no protection. So consider, if that's a concern of yours, you might want to consider an inherited IRA accumulation trust, if properly drafted, can offer protection even if particular state law does not. So if your kids live in a state that isn't covered, or you live in a state where it isn't covered, this might make sense to name a trust as a beneficiary. All right, Walter, I'll come back to your question. All right, so now, again, I want to give Shannon broke down, she's done this twice. So she broke down a really great chart of what we're talking about here, the types of accounts and how they're protected. And then she did a great chart of the different states. I had a long conversation with her about this last month when we were talking about, when we were in Washington. She did a great job. So if you look at this, so these are these ERISA plans. So these are 401ks, profit sharing plans with at least one employee that is not an owner or spouse. 100% federal bankruptcy protection. Also, 100% federal creditor protection. And any funds that come from an ERISA plan that you roll over to your IRA are also that follows that protection. Defined benefit plan with at least one employer. So these are, think pension, right? With at least one employee other than owner or spouse, federal, 100%, creditor protected, 100%. And these are the case law. Again, I'm not a lawyer. I'm just repeating Shannon's information. Simple and SEP IRAs and other non-ERISA plans, federal, 100%. This depends on the state statutory protection. Traditional IRA, you get that federal bankruptcy protection, but now the creditor protection depends on that. Same, these are contributory IRAs. Federal is, again, $1,512,000. The rest of it is covered by the state. Rollover IRA or Roth IRA funds, from an employer plan, bankruptcy protection, federal 100%, state by state creditor protection. You got to remember that. Now, not inherited IRAs. Look at the difference. Inherited IRAs, 0% federal bankruptcy protection, state bankruptcy protection per state, and the creditor protection by state as well. I'm hoping you're understanding the difference between bankruptcy and creditor, and then what drives it, federal or state. And we have a lot of references here. All right, now let's look at the states. So I'm going to do some examples, and then we're going to talk about some of the most common states of people we deal with. So here's Alaska. Alaska's a good one. 100%. Alaska statute says inherited IRAs are included. So your IRAs and your inherited IRAs even are 100% protected against creditor and bankruptcy protection. I mentioned Florida, so let's go to Florida. Where did Florida go? These are alphabetical. Florida, 100%. Inherited IRAs included. So that's good. Let's go to Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania, right here, 100%, but not within 1 year, not including rollovers, contribution greater than $15,000 in any 1 year period, or fraudulent conveyance. So this is an area where if you have a concern, you better get an attorney involved, right? Because that's a little confusing. We could break it down, but it's a little confusing, not including rollovers. So that's money that comes from ERISA plans, right? But not within 1 year of other contributions and whatnot, and contribution greater than $15,000 in any 1 year period, or fraudulent conveyance if you did something incorrectly, meaning like intentionally incorrectly. So that's interesting. New Jersey is another state we have a lot of clients in. 100% and 100%. Inherited IRAs may be protected by case law. There's a question there. So it's not like some of those other states where we go through and say, yes, 100% protected. So this is another area. If you've got your kids or people who might be inheriting your IRAs, you got to talk to a lawyer about that if that's a concern of yours. And frankly, it always should be a concern, because when you're talking about creditors, you're talking about, divorce is a little different, but spousal actions for sure, car accidents, general accidents, if somebody slips and falls at your house, there's just things like that. So you just want to make sure that you're protected. In bankruptcy, of course, you've got to look at that. It could be business issues, if you have a failed business or something like that. Look at Ohio. Ohio is limited to the extent reasonably necessary for support. Inherited IRAs included, no exemption for SEP and simple IRAs. So it gets complicated. If you want this information, I think that I could, if you want specific state information, I can copy and paste it too. I'll see if I can get this on the website also when it's done. But then Shannon ranked them. So the best A+ states are Alaska, Alabama, Arizona, Florida, Idaho, New Jersey. Here's this: may be protected. North Carolina, South Carolina. South Carolina is like New Jersey that way, may be protected. And Texas. B+, we've got quite a few: Colorado, Connecticut, Delaware, District of Columbia, Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Kentucky, Maryland, Mississippi, Nevada, New Hampshire, New Mexico, Oklahoma, Oregon, Rhode Island, and Washington. Grade C is limitations to protection, but generally protected: Georgia, Hawaii, Kansas, Kentucky, Louisiana, Michigan, Montana, New York, Pennsylvania, Tennessee. We only get a C. Isn't that a shame? I'm going to talk to our legislators about that. Tennessee, Utah, Vermont, West Virginia, and Wisconsin. And then the worst states. She doesn't go to F. She only goes to D. Arkansas, California, Maine, Massachusetts, Minnesota, Missouri, Nebraska, North Dakota, Ohio, South Dakota, Virginia, and Wyoming. I would say that if your kids or yourself are in these states, you should have a discussion with an attorney and a planner. And you know my feeling about the team, right? CFP, CPA, at least one attorney, all working for you. These are the kind of things that get uncovered. Do you have any issues around creditor protection? What happens if I leave my money to my kids and he lives in California and I live here in Pennsylvania? And God forbid, he's got a lawsuit against him. Is that money accessible? So it may make sense to put the funds into a trust, but you want to have that discussion with a qualified attorney. So again, my goal here wasn't to give you all the legal direction, because I'm not a lawyer, about your protection of your IRAs. It's to raise awareness. And the question was, is my IRA protected against creditors? Well, the answer, as you can see, is, well, maybe, It depends on where you live. It depends on where the funds came from. So it's not always about having the exact answer right now. It's about knowing the questions to ask and where to get the information. I hope that makes sense. So you've got to, if your situation, if this concerns you at all in your situation, reach out to us. Perhaps we can help you resolve it or find somebody who can. But it's something to be aware of. I'm really happy to hear, and this is a very smart audience. I was happy to see that 70-some% of you said, it was actually 77% of you said your IRA is not protected, because way too many people believe that your IRA is 100% protected. So I hope that was helpful. And I do have a question from Walter, and Walter says, so if IRA under certain circumstances is not protected, but Social Security is this yet another reason to spend down IRA in order to delay Social Security to 70? That's a good point. It may be a good reason for you. It may not be a good reason for someone else. They might live, their whole family might live in a 100% protected state like Alaska or Florida, and nobody has intentions on leaving, and or they don't have that concern, or they say my concern isn't for myself, but it's for my kids, and we're going to leave we're going to name the beneficiary a trust. All right, so that is the program for today. I hope it was helpful. We went through some really good slot updates. We talked about the markets, and then we talked about, is your IRA creditor protected? There is no webinar next week. Next week follows Memorial Day. So please remember those who gave sacrifice for our country. There is no webinar on Tuesdays that follow market holidays. So that is a market holiday. So we'll see you the following week. We'll be in June, and I'll be excited to see you all then. If you have any questions, if you'd like to schedule an appointment, you can reach out to admin or questions. Let's leave it at questions@attleborowealth.com. That's questions@attleborowealth.com. Please always feel free to share this information with anybody you think would benefit. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe, like, and notification button on YouTube. And otherwise, we'll see you next week.